Hey, this is Meridith Elliott Powell, and welcome to Thrive. I cannot believe we are here at the week I have been waiting for what seems like years. It is finally the launch of my new book, Thrive, Turning Uncertainty to Competitive Advantage. And I've got my good friend and my Sales Logic co-host here with me, Mark Hunter. Mark, I'm going to quick play the video, and then you and I are going to jump in to conversation, talking about uncertainty, what it's going to take to grow in today's economy, and anything else we want to talk about. All right, welcome back again. Mark, thanks for joining me here. What do you have rocking and rolling today?
We've got a lot of stuff going. In fact, I've got an audience on a separate channel watching this right now. So yeah, this is kind of cool. Hey, congratulations. I mean, you are absolutely crushing it in terms of the number of reviews. I mean, your book hasn't even been out a week. You're putting me to shame. Yeah, I just want to know that you're putting me to, you are no longer going to be my friend. So,
well, the thing is, I mean, I have been promoting this book for the last couple of years. I think I started promoting it before I even actually put pen to paper and started to write it. But it truly has been a labor of love, and I am so excited. The book is out of the gate. It is off the shelves, and it is really started with really strong reviews. But let's just jump in and really just start talking about what do you see happening in the marketplace, and what do you see happening as it relates to uncertainty and what we've got coming ahead of us in the next year or so?
Well, first of all, I've got to call out your book, because I'll tell you what. First of all, I love the chapter. I love the title of chapter 10. Just saying. See, it's going to force people to now go look at the back book and look at chapter 10. I just like the title. That's all. Anyway,
that's good. Yeah, because we're not going to tell you. We're not going to tell you what's in it, right?
No, because we're going to make them go buy the book. Of course. Hey, you know what I like about the book, and really you talk about uncertainty. All of the companies you talk about, and I can relate so well to several of the companies. In fact, one of the companies you talk about, I used to work for. You didn't know that.
Oh, really? Which one is that?
Baker's Chocolate, which ultimately became part of General Foods, which I was part of for 12 years, and then became part of Kraft Foods. Now it's Heinz Kraft. So I mean, there are so many pieces in that book that I can relate to, that I love, and it's amazing as you talk about the stories. Jim Beam, for instance. I gave away one of the companies that you talk about there.
That's right. You can give away all of the companies. I'm so good with that.
But I mean, here's what I find interesting is so many other things are replaying back again today. And the uncertainty that we face today is exactly what these companies have been going through way back to the Civil War.
Yeah.
And that's because here's what I'm seeing right now is we're in this middle of we're in an enthusiastic economy. But the enthusiastic economy isn't necessarily translating into decisions. I'm seeing a lot of companies doing research. Oh, we want to talk to you. We want to look at you. We want to look at this. But they're not quite ready to buy. They're not quite ready. They're almost waiting for okay, what's going to happen next? Is there going to be another shoe that's going to fall? And so that's what I'm seeing out there. I'm seeing that in terms of both buying, hiring, everything out there. Yeah.
I've never heard anybody call it an enthusiastic economy. I love that description, where people are seeing optimism, but they're still, they're still worried about it. And Mark, one of the big reasons that I wrote the book, I mean, what I wanted to do was, people really have seen uncertainty as a negative. Even in good economic times, we worry about what is going to happen. And most people want to be strong and be able to get through that, but they're just not sure what to do. And that's why we really dove into the book, because we want to take that question off the table. The formula is truly what you do.
Well, it is. And this is what's so funny, because we typically dwell on the valleys. Oh, no, the dark days. We dwell on the dark days. And that's the wrong place to put our focus. Our focus needs to be on the next mountaintop that we're going to be on. That's where we need, and that's what your book. I mean, as you go through the book and share story after story about companies and how they were literally on death's doorsteps, And yet they came back around. There's a line I use. In fact, it's interesting. I was working with a company today and I shared the line. I said, businesses do not fail due to a lack of financial capital. They fail due to a lack of intellectual capital.
Yeah, so true.
And if you, and that's what your book delivers is intellectual capital.
Yeah.
Because give me intellectual capital and I'll find a way that I don't need, or let's put it this way, I won't be as pressed on the financial capital side.
Yeah, the phrase that I always use, and it's one of the biggest things that I learned from the book, is that success is not logical. It isn't about having more money, more time, more resources. It is literally about what you choose to focus on and how you react to change, how you anticipate change. And are you somebody who can take action in the middle of challenge times, or are you frozen by them? And again, what we wanted to do with the book was take that off the table. We didn't want to leave any question in your mind as to what you're supposed to do. And it's the beauty of it. If you follow the formula, you're going to know how to run your business, whether you're small or whether you're a huge corporation.
But I know something that is logical. That's sales logic. Oh, I'm sorry. I just had to throw that.
That's our podcast.
Of course, that's our podcast.
Which happens every Saturday morning, right here at 9:00 Eastern. If you want to know how to sell in the middle of uncertainty, that is where you should be. Tuning in.
Was that a shameless plug or what?
I think it wasn't. No, it was shameless, but it was a good plug, because we're really starting to get a good followership there and people really tuning in. I do think we want to mention that, if you do have a sales question, go to saleslogicpodcast.com, put it out there, and we'll actually feature you as part of the podcast. We'll answer your question right there live.
Hey, are we talking Sales Logic or are we talking Thrive? Let's talk Thrive. Let's talk the book Thrive. Okay, come on, Meridith.
I think we can really talk about either. Mark, I'm curious. What are some of the biggest challenges your customers are facing right now, other than being in an enthusiastic economy and not really sure, should we make a decision? Should we hold back? What are some of the biggest challenges you're seeing right now?
By the way, I just bought the domain name enthusiasticeconomy.com. So don't think about it. It comes back to the supply chain. It's the supply chain. That is, I was just doing a webinar a couple of hours ago for a company in the building materials. And it's all about the supply chain. Yeah. There's so many wiggles and shakes that just aren't working right. Because if you think about it, we're trying to scale the economy all at one time. And it's a little bit like, if you think about you think about the airlines. And after a snowstorm, typically, it took a week for the airlines to get back up to speed, because the crews were in one city, planes were in another city, everything was disarranged. And it wasn't until the airlines got into a real systematic approach as to how to shut down, how to move things around, that they can gear back up. And see, we've never had this experience from an economy standpoint. We've never, I don't know about you, but I wasn't around for the last pandemic. So this is all new.
Yeah. I think added to that. So I was working with a client that I coached just yesterday, and he said he doesn't think it's going to be until 2022 that the supply chain even begins to work itself out. I'm curious what you think, because one of the beauties of talking about uncertainty is that necessity becomes the mother of invention, right? You've got to figure it out. Is there anything interesting or different that your clients are doing to deal with some of the supply chain challenges?
Well, yeah, I think this what's happening. It's amazing the number of different processes, or for the Canadian friends, processes that are being put in place that didn't exist 6 months ago, that didn't exist a year ago. That's one of the things that I'm finding. As I'm finding, companies are finding entirely new ways with which to construct. I'm finding companies that used to do a final assembly or total assembly on site. Now what they're doing is, with their contractors, they're doing pre-assembly. And they're only doing final assembly on site. They're moving things around because of labor, because of shipping, and so forth. And I agree, we will not see global shipping in particular. And I think the chip shortage is much more severe than people realize. Much. I think the chip shortage is going to take at least a full year to sort itself out. Again, I could be wrong, but yeah, I'm agreeing with you on the other person. 22 is when we'll finally see the supply chain get back together.
And then there's still uncertainty as it relates to that, right? I mean, it depends on how things go with China. It depends on how things go in some of these countries where so many things are made. But let's talk about another big level of uncertainty. And another big level of uncertainty is labor. I heard a restaurant owner today talking on the news, talking about the fact that he's a franchise owner, and he's willing to pay teenage managers, people who are 18, 19 years old, $50,000 a year to manage the restaurant, with the idea that they're going to go on and have a chance to actually own a franchise, to bypass college, to bypass debt. He owns, I don't know, I think he said about 15 to 20 of this franchise. And he's going to put younger people in charge of it. And with the idea that he's going to train them, he's going to develop them, and they're getting a shot to go directly at owning a business. Right or wrong, whether you agree with it, I thought it was a really innovative solution to what is a massive challenge right now, especially in the restaurant industry, and that's labor.
Oh, I think you are spot on with that. In fact, it's very interesting. I saw some numbers yesterday that the average wage difference between manufacturing and fast food is shrinking as the restaurant industry increases their wages. We're seeing a shrinkage, and will that impact manufacturing in terms of their ability to source labor? See, I mean, all of these factors are coming into play. It's going to be fascinating to watch where this all goes.
Well, what I love about what we're talking about, though, is that, and I think this is what our listeners can really get from this, is to grab the bull by the horns. The challenge that is sitting in front of you, and that's really what I tried to lay out in the book. That's really where the formula comes in, is that you have to understand there is more outside of your control than within your control to be successful. I mean, I think about everything that is happening in the world. I really believe in the next few months, we're going to go through a boom. I kind of fall on the side that after that boom, we're going to see some writing of things. I think it's going to be challenging after that, but it doesn't have to be a negative if you know what to do and you know how to follow it. And that's really what I try to do with the book, is to take the thinking out of it and say, if you do this, you're going to be well positioned if the shift is in your favor, and you're going to be well positioned even if it isn't.
Now, you just said something big there in terms of the success, in terms of what we can't control. And we are all spending way too much time looking at things we can't control. That is what. Focus on what you can control. I just did a pivot in a segment of my business just literally this morning.
Wow.
And yeah, and it's really, and we'll have a separate phone call. I'll bring you up to speed on, because it's really kind of cool. But it's because I'm looking at the tea leaves. I'm seeing things out there, and I can't control the tea leaves, but I can control how I respond to the tea leaves. And see, this is what I think. Now, there's two sides of this coin. Do you be nimble and flex quickly, or do you stay the course? This is a challenge. Now, on the one hand, you might say, okay, I'm being nimble and flipping, but no, I'm staying the course because it's still within the context of the business plan, the business model I have. See, and I think this is so key. Companies, as we scale back up, don't go thinking you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. No. Stay focused in tight first, and see what you can make those wiggles and shakes first. Because I see a real risk of people running after the shiny object.
Yeah,
wow, big mistake.
There's two strategies that I think really align to what you're talking about. Two strategies in the book, and it's strategy number 2 and strategy number 4. And strategy number 2 is condition yourself for change. You called it tea leaves. We've got to read what's happening out there, and we have to ask ourselves, what, if anything, do I need to pay attention to? And there's a tool that we use that comes with the book called a skeptic. And if you get the book, you can get the skeptic tool in there and do the exercise that actually puts you in a position to anticipate the changes coming in the marketplace, actually start controlling change rather than change controlling you. But the other thing is, and it's interesting, it's strategy number 4. And we say in the book that the strategies have to go in order because they build on one another. And strategy number 4 is about not chasing the shiny object. I found it fascinating that when I wrote the book, the way that these companies all made decisions in the middle of an uncertain marketplace, where they made them according to their core values. And like you said, you're not walking away from the core of who you are as a business. That's why it's a right decision for you. But if you looked at it and, the shiny object was that you needed to start selling cars because those are really going gangbusters, it wouldn't be in alignment with who you are and what you're trying to do. And so those two strategies really going together are exactly what you're talking about.
And that screams loud as you read through your book, because you tell about a number of the companies that were family-owned companies.
Yeah.
And how they stayed absolutely true to their core. And that's what enabled them to weather generation after generation after generation of being able to sustain themselves.
Yeah, it's powerful. It's amazing. I mean, it just, it actually works.
Surprisingly enough, it does. That's what's. Hey, what's funny is, and of course we won't reveal, but skeptic actually stands for something. But we won't. We'll make them buy the book, right? Make them buy the book so they can really understand what skeptic stands for.
That's right. It's kind of cool.
I'm trying to help you sell books. Okay,
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing.
You're good. If nothing else, we're tempting. We're tempting people. But the book does come with tools and strategies for every single chapter, so that you can actually implement these things and actually, put them in place.
Yeah, it really does, and that's where, your book is almost 3 books in one, because you have the history lessons of the companies. You have the 9 steps, you're talking about, and then you have the skeptic tools and so forth. I mean, that's what I kind of like about it. And hey, you know what? We should remind people, as you're watching this, as you read the book, leave a review on Amazon. Let others know, because again, I bought the Kindle. I bought multiple copies of the book, but I bought the Kindle so I could download it immediately that first morning it was available. And read through it and posted a review the first morning it was out, because it's that good. So,
well, and I think we should also mention that I went ahead and I recorded the audio on it. I know we've got a lot of international listeners right now, and reading English may not be your first choice, but listening to it may be a little bit easier. And I went ahead, just like you did with your book, Mark, A Mind for Sales. I went ahead and read it myself. It's kind of funny because you talk about, doing the book, and everybody's like, who are you going to get to read it? And I, talked to some people about it. And then I thought, this is my heart. This is my passion. I really ought to read the book. And I had a friend call me yesterday who's listening to it. And she said, Meredith, it's great because it sounds like you're really talking to me.
As read by the author. There is. I mean, there is something more valuable. And it is a little bit creepy when you read your own book, isn't it? I mean, you're sitting in a little soundproof booth and you are reading it and you go, did I really write this? Am I really that? Well, at least I said, am I really that smart? I mean, you're smart. I don't know. Believe me, I just hang out with smart people.
It's a relief to read your book and then actually think your book is good. I mean, that's pretty amazing in and of itself.
Okay, I got to put you on the spot. I got to ask you a question.
Sure.
What's the one part of the book that you wish you had gone down deeper?
Oh, wow. What a really good question. That's really easy for me because I think it's probably going to, I'm probably going to write on my next one. I was fascinated by the chapter on values. I am amazed. I don't know what it is, the magic of values, but that chapter and the stories around it, the company that we feature around values, one is King Arthur Flour, and I won't spoil it for you, but it's they're a flour company that's been around since the 1700s. They are still in business today. The oldest flour company in the country, one of the only to come through the challenges that have, that have befallen our world in the last 250 years. But how their values gave them courage, how their values lighted a path. And just there's something magic about following and being aligned, knowing, aligning, and sticking to your values. That is the magic bullet you need in business. And I only did a chapter on it, and I'm fascinated by values, and I would like to go different. I would like to go deeper.
That strikes a chord, because it's interesting, because the financial community loves to discount values, loves to discount integrity, loves to discount trust, because it's not measurable. I mean, GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. There's no line for that. There is no line for that. There's no line for human intellect. And yet these are the cornerstones of each company that you wrote about.
Yeah.
That's the cornerstone that kept it wasn't the brick and mortar building. It was the people.
Yeah.
It was the people and the values that the people had that kept those businesses together. Yeah.
Mark, check out the comment by one of our listeners here.
I listen to Mark's audiobooks while I run. Does it help you run faster, or does it help you run slower? I love it.
Gotta love that, right? You can take a little bit of Mark with you to stay motivated.
You know what's funny? I don't even listen to my own books when I run. So there you go. So I mean, hey.
Yeah, you are so right. Purpose-driven values and goals is a game changer. So I really feel like a book that I've got in me is I'd really like to do research on values and really start to crack the code. Crack the code on those. But it is again, it's just amazing to me. Another company that we highlight around values is one we pretty much all know here in the U.S., and that's ChickfilA, and their courage of not opening on Sundays. And while we're all used to it now, and we all see them having great success, the courage that took at the very beginning when you're starting a fast food restaurant to do what nobody else is doing because it doesn't align with your values. And their success, they're the third fastest growing or the third largest in the country, yet they have less locations than others.
I've got to add some commentary on that, because Coca-Cola used to be a major client of mine, and of course Coca-Cola supplies Chick-fil-A, and we would do case studies as to what how much business are they losing because they're closed on Sundays. And Coca-Cola used to, and it didn't matter. It did not matter. Their values was that they were closed on Sundays. And if you stop and think about this, they have locations in airports. In fact, it's funny. They have a location in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. That's the big football stadium in Atlanta. And if you think about it, NFL games are on Sundays. Chick-fil-A is not open. That Chick-fil-A stand converts into something else. And I can't remember offhand what it converts into. But you think about that. I mean, there are airport locations. They're closed on Sundays, and an airport is most airports are very, very busy on Sundays. But those are the values that they stick with. And what does it do? It translates back to the hiring process, which translates back to the customer service they provide. Again, how do you quantify that? But they are. I mean, I spent 6 years with McDonald's Corporation. I mean, I can tell you more about fast food industry that puts your head spin. And I look at the Chick-fil-A business model and I go, man, it is so gold. Because they know their backdoor costs and they know the front end customer service very, very well.
I think it's going to be interesting to see some of the long-term business implications of large companies that we see right now that are doing some things that are not aligned with the values of the company, and see if they are still around 10 to 20 years from now.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think in the old days when boomers were in charge, you could get away with that.
Yeah.
Today's generations, you can't do that. the value employee. You look at the issues that Google has. Every time you turn around, there's a group of employees within Google rising up because Google did something here, whether it was how they responded to China, how they responded to Taiwan, how they responded to, whatever it might be. And this is the whole thing that I think values and morals are going to become a much bigger play in every corporation. As I think, I think we begin to see capitalism redefined. Now, I'm brutally capitalistic. I'm all in on capitalism, but I think there is a little bit of compassionate capitalism that is taking hold, and I'm in favor of it.
Well, what's funny about that is I don't really think that's redefined. I think that's where capitalism started. And then, somewhere around the 1920s, you had the first coal barons and railroad barons and things, things come in, and it got derailed. But I believe at its roots, especially when you're talking about Main Street or you're talking about the closely held and family held businesses, that's what they do, right? That's how they run. Certainly they're there to make a profit, but it is never at the expense of their customers. It is never at the expense of their employees, and it's never at the expense of their community. So as I'm watching some of these, large financial institutions, do some of the things that they're doing, or some of the larger corporations doing some of the things that they're doing, I really wonder what that impact is going to be like, because I do think that it's, it is at the end of the day, values win, and at its core, capitalism was always like that. Just like anything, it gets.
Yeah. And I'm going to call out Jamie Dimon. I'm going to compliment Jamie Dimon. Mm-hmm. Because, in his role, as CEO of, is he the largest bank or the second largest bank?
I think they're the largest.
They're the largest. He has been right on the forefront of talking about that. And I compliment him on that. I very much compliment him on that. And, here's somebody who could easily hide behind the numbers, but he's chosen to be bold out there. And I think as a result, I don't know if the financial community has rewarded the stock price, but I believe that the employee base has rewarded, which translates into customer service, which, if you think about it, there's another bank out there that begins with the letter W that has had more than its share of regulatory issues. Why? Because their values were not aligned right.
Absolutely. All right, Mark, we've got Jon Register waiting in the wings here. I'm ready to pop him in. So not that we are kicking you out, but any final words about uncertainty, even final words about Sales Logic Podcast?
Well, Sales Logic Podcast, we'll be talking about the book Thrive, and you can only listen to Sales Logic this Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Time if you have purchased 10 copies of Thrive and left a 5-star review. So there you go.
All right. I love that. Thank you. Thank you, my friend. We will see you Saturday, if not before.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. I am super excited to be bringing in my friend, none other than Mr. Adversity himself, Jon Register. Hey, Jon, how are you?
Oh, yeah, Meridith, I'm doing great. How's my mic? Because I am in the car pushing through on Wi-Fi, so I just want to make sure I'm good.
You sound great. I appreciate you joining us. Talk about getting through adversity. You've just finished up an event and still jumped on and joined us anyway.
Absolutely. Have to do that. We got to keep on pushing, keep thriving. It doesn't stop just because we stop. We got to keep moving.
That's right. So are you home in Colorado today, or are you on the road?
I am in Colorado and having a great time. Actually, today is going on. I take these days off because to kind of not give back, but to volunteer with CHASA, which is the Colorado High School Athletic Activity Association. And we have our state track and field meet. So we're coming out of COVID. All the kids are on the track. The parents are out in the stands. It's really great to be back. And I'm just calling some of the races this afternoon and this morning. So it's been fantastic.
Oh, how great is that? It must feel fantastic to be back live and in person.
Yeah, it really does. And I know we still have a little ways to go and we're not all the way out. I call it like the 300 meters of a 400 meter run. And so at 300 meters, the monkey jumps on your back and you're trying not to die and try to fight across the finish line. And I feel that's where we are right now with COVID, right? We've run 300 meters. Let's just close the race. I'm always telling my athletes, close the race, run all the way through the finish line, make sure you get across, and then you can breathe and relax after that's over with.
Nice. And that is exactly what 2020 and 2021 have turned out to be. And listen, I got to tell you, so I wanted to have you on this show as I got ready to launch this book, because I just don't know anybody who personifies getting through uncertainty and adversity better than you do. And if I have one mission in life right now, it is to help people start to view uncertainty as opportunity. Because even though we are starting to come out of this, the truth is we got bumpy roads ahead of us. I think we're going to start to see change on steroids. So I'd love for anybody listening to us who doesn't know your story, for you to just share it with us.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that, Meredith. So on May the 17th, 1994, I was one of the world's fastest hurdlers, 400-meter hurdlers, one time around the track, four-time All-American from the University of Arkansas, have 4 national championship rings, was in the United States Army, combat Army veteran, on my way to officer candidate school. And I was the 8th fastest hurdler, as I said, by USA Track and Field, and the one to watch for trying to make the 1996 Olympic Games. I misstepped a hurdle during a training session. I hyperextended my left leg. That hyperextension caused a blockage to the popliteal artery behind the kneecap. And 7 days later, was left with a choice: either keep my leg and use a walker or a wheelchair for the rest of my life, or undergo an amputation. So my male deductive reasoning said, because I was in so much pain, if I just get rid of the leg, I'll get rid of the pain. Yeah. So I told Dr. Mullins, I know it's got to be amputated. And immediately he went into work, and I woke up, 2 nights later at 11 o'clock at night, in more pain than my male deductive reasoning had reasoned, with all this phantom pain that was going on. So we talk about, you said uncertainty, right? And a lot of people have been saying that word, and you've been doing such a phenomenal job through this entire pandemic, really pushing into the space, trying to figure it out. And along with some others, but you got to do that. But the question I have is, when did we ever have certainty?
Yeah, true.
Right, we never had it. We still don't have it. And it's like the old story I heard during the pandemic, when I was thinking about what the administration were talking about, is that they were prepared for multiple pandemics, right? That's what was going on, and we didn't really understand. So it's like the woman that comes from the future, say it's from 2130, and comes back to us and arrives to you, Meredith, and says, Meredith, what year am I in? And you say, oh, you're in October of 2020. And then she says, oh my gosh, the first year of the pandemics.
Oh, right.
And so we're not thinking about that. We're only thinking, I just want to get back to the way it was. And we see during this time that people lost oxygen out of their environment. And that was no different with me when I had my amputation. I began losing oxygen out of my environment. What does that look like? Well, when you lose oxygen out of your environment, the first thing you do before you take your last breath is you panic. You're looking for anything to grab onto that can give you a sense of quote unquote normalcy and give you certainty, which you think is was actually an illusion. And so what do? What was the thing that we did when we panicked when COVID first hit? What was it? Now, a rhetorical question.
Well, I mean, we get angry, and we start running and trying to do anything that we can do, and wasting time and wasting resources, or some people froze.
Right. But there was a specific thing that most people did in America, which was off the charts weird.
What was that?
We bought toilet paper.
Oh, we bought toilet paper, right.
We bought hand sanitizers. We fought over toilet paper and hand sanitizers. We were going to fisticuffs in Walmart and Sam's Club. We were going to fisticuffs in all the big warehouses, right? And people were trying to get some sense of control, which they thought they had left. Just because we're going back, that's why I said we're at the 300-meter mark, like in a 400-meter dash. The same thing is beginning to happen as we go back. I don't want to conform to the way it used to be. And we're seeing it in a lot of different areas. We're seeing on airlines, one flight attendant got her teeth punched out because of FAA regulations and trying to enforce them on the plane, and somebody says, no, I'm no longer going to do that. I'm no longer going to allow the government to take over my life, so I'm going to punch your teeth out, right? So that was one. But we're also seeing it as, in what we're talking about, what you're talking about today is, and Thrive, is what does it mean going back into the workforce? I have now proven that I can be productive outside of brick and mortar. And folks are having a hard time saying, I'm going to go back into a building just to be part of a team, that the team was gelling together all during COVID. And so there's a whole shift that's going on right now inside of our communities. Do we have to go back into that world? How long will that last? Is the hybrid going to be here to stay? Or are we going to force people to come back? I personally think if you think you're going to try to force people to come back, you're going to find yourself with a shortage of people.
I agree with that. It was just working with a coaching client this morning that 1 month ago, he was adamant his entire team needed to come back. And I talked to him today and he said, I'm not really sure I was right about that. He said, I can't argue with the fact that they're productive. I can't argue with the fact that they're happy this way. I need to get them together a little bit. Jon, one big question I've got for you that I'm really curious about, because I think that this is one of the biggest problems with starting to embrace uncertainty as a positive. When you woke up in that hotel room, how did you deal with the anger and the fear? Because the two biggest obstacles to the unknown is the courage to go where we don't know what is going to happen, or we've lost what we knew what is the first thing that bubbled for me when the crisis hit was fear. Coming right behind that was anger. And so I'm curious, how did you deal with it? Do we have to process them? I just love your point of view from that, because one of the beauties of your story is it's extreme. Most of us, for the uncertainty we have to deal with in life, it is not the level to which you've had to come through. Oops, I think we might have frozen there a second. Oh, and I really, really want that question answered. And of course, Jon froze on me. All right, let's go ahead and bring in Dr. Mary Kelly. And if we can get Jon Register back, we will get him back. Mary, you ready to join the stream and fill in?
I am. And of course, I always love my buddy, Jon Register. We're both in Colorado most of the time. And he was Army and I was Navy. And just in case you're still watching, Jon, you still owe me lunch. From that Army-Navy game a few years ago when we had a bet, just saying. Army has, of course, beat Navy since then, but that's why I need to get the lunch while I can. But you were talking about, him lying in that hospital bed and waking up to that fear and the anger. And you and I have talked a lot about how people process, and I love that. My process was a little bit different, and it could be that military training, because while this is, yes, it's a dangerous situation. As an economist, I looked at the numbers and the facts and kind of played the odds. I'm like, okay, so what are the chances of getting this? And what are the chances? And how do we mitigate that? So to me, it was a fascinating numbers game. And the other part of it, because I talk about the 6 stages of every crisis, challenge, or change, was excitement. I was like, aren't we lucky to be living in a time of such upheaval, of such renewal, that it's forcing us to move forward in different ways. I know people are nostalgic for 2019, and I get a little frustrated with that, because I'm like, but we're never going to go back to what that was. So how do we make going forward even better? What do we do? I don't know about you, but we have talked about it. Hotel rooms are cleaner now than they have ever been. Airlines finally decided they were going to clean the planes. And the last 3 flights I was on, they didn't give me the little sanitizer when I got on board. And I was like, hey, where's my sanitizer? I am here to clean your plane, and you should use me in the labor force.
That's right. All right, I'm going to bring Jon back to answer this question. You hold tight, though, because you and I have a lot to talk about. All right, Jon.
Okay, I apologize.
Answer this question, and then we'll let you go back to your students.
Okay. So the question is how
How did
handling
you
the fear.
Yeah. How did you deal with the fear
Yeah.
and the anger?
So it's really tough. It's a hard answer because most people think that you get over it right away. And I hope you can hear me. I got the fans
Right.
blowing on my phone, so it won't go out.
You are so good.
So one of my fears was my wife was going to leave me because I was a soldier, remember, and I saw a lot of people, a lot of service members, they lost their family relationships when they came back from combat.
Yeah.
So that was a real thing when I saw that. However, that wasn't my fear. My fear, actually, the fear behind the fear was not her leaving me, but am I still desirable?
Yeah.
Do people still like me? Do I have my job, but what does it mean if I don't? How do I handle that? And that's what people couldn't articulate and still can't articulate, even when we're going back, trying to get back to a similar life that's now gone. But we also have the fear of other people believing for us what we can or cannot do, which is based upon what they believe they could or could not do if they were in our situation. And they have influence over our lives, or if we allow them. And then we have systemic fears, which are out there. Who is it in society that I'm listening to that's driving my fears in the first place? Is it me watching a movie with Captain Hook and he's the villain of Peter Pan, but he's an amputee. He's a villain. He's dark and mysterious. But wait a minute, I'm dark and mysterious now. Is that right? Because I'm an amputee?
Right.
So we begin to assimilate those things together. So what we have to do is really identify not just the fear, but the object of the fear that's behind it. And so when we do that, now we can begin to have some truth that's coming out. We think we're going to rebuild our lives, but we don't. Had I overcome the amputation of my left leg, I'd have my leg back. I went on to win the Paralympic silver medal in the long jump, but that wasn't the first thing I was thinking about when I had my amputation. I began to have a glimpse of vision of what could be possible. That was my redefining moment. And I had to redefine it to the point of where my truth outweighed my fear, then I could commit to a courageous life.
I love that. Truth outweighed fear.
Truth outweighs fear. If it doesn't, we'll never commit to the courageous act, the courageous life that we need to do. And we never will articulate the fears behind the fear. So fear is a real thing that we need, and it can lead to anger or can lead to some other things, right? Mm-hmm. It can also lead to positivity, to a resolve, a resolution that we have. June 17th, 1994 was the O.J. Simpson follow on the I-5 freeway. It was the day I was in the most pain in my life. He's writing a suicide note. We're thinking the juice is going to check out this before the whole trial kicked off. We see it happen. And I say, no matter how bad this thing gets, no matter how bad this phantom pain gets, I'm going to push through it because I know it's going to get worse before it gets better. There's going to be light, but I can't even see the darkness right now. I'm not even at the darkest point of this, but I'm going to make it through. And so we have this resolve, but that's only after I make the jump. And make no mistake, Meridith, the jump is our jump. The jump is your jump. No one can make you do the jump.
No, that's so true. I always say that to leaders is you can open the door, you can invite people to jump, but whether they jump or not, whether they cross that threshold, that is one of the hardest things about being a leader is you can't do it for them.
Right. And I know you got a book that's out there, and I've got books out there as well. But, the book's not going to make them do it. The book will lead you to a place to where you have to make the decision and get that truth over your fear. But you still have to make the jump.
Yeah.
And we want people to hold our hand and walk us through and do all this. No, you got to do it. And that's a hard conversation to have with people, because if you don't, you have to live not in regret, but you have to live in a space of justification. You justify why you were not courageous enough to others, to society, why you were not courageous enough to make that jump. Yeah.
So more often than not, I have made that jump because I didn't want to have to live with that regret. Jon, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. We're going to let you go back to those kids and the awesome work that you're doing. But I feel like we have just started a conversation. So I'm going to reach out to you to come back on. You also owe Mary Kelly lunch. She'd kill me if I didn't tell you that.
I do it from like 2 years ago. But I could blame COVID on COVID.
All right, my friend. I'll see you soon. Thank you. Hey, Mary Kelly, and you are back. So I did I made sure that Jon knows he owes you lunch.
I heard. That's so great. I'm watching you do this because it's just so fun to watch you work and to get knowledge and just see all the different players that you've got coming out to support you on this fabulous new book. I love I love the research you did in this new book. I love the fact that you didn't just go back, 3 or 4 years or 10 years and make it easy. No, you went back to the 17th century. And many people just think, how in the world is something that happened almost 300 years ago applicable to me now? And that's the part of this book I just loved.
Yeah, it's to me, I found it one of the most calming parts of the book was the fact that, when I call the first part of the book a history lesson you'll love. And the reason is because you look back 250 years and you see that our forefathers have gone through so much more than we have gone through. And not only have they come through it, but the innovation, the creativity, the ideas, the wisdom is powerful, and just it's important to spend the time paying attention to that.
I totally agree. And I think in this sort of Snapchat, Instagram world where, we're celebrating that we had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for lunch, that sometimes the real wisdom gets lost because we're so consumed about being in the present that sometimes we don't look at the past.
Yeah, I agree. I think the other thing we really gain from the past is that and I think it's something important for us to know as entrepreneurs, as employees, is sometimes it's hard. It's just hard. It's not that it's complicated, but the work is there's no easy way through. And when you hit uncertainty, even though getting in there and being creative and innovative can be inspiring and motivated, the truth is there's work that has to be done, and there is no magic bullet. There is no instant gratification.
That is totally right. And, I've written some things called, how to be a chess master in a Snapchat world, and how to play the long game. And this is where I think many people struggle in their businesses today, that when the virus crisis hit, and it looked like, we were going to have short-term supply chain problems. And it looked like we were having short-term labor problems. And it looked like our businesses were being shut down because of these things. Some people just panicked. And to me, part of that sense of urgency is really, really healthy. This virus took a big spotlight and it put it on our businesses and our organizations. And for many of us, this allowed people to see the cracks in the foundation where people said, you know what, if we want to do this long term, we've got to make some changes. We've got to move forward better. And this is where your book is so genius. How do we do that? What's going to guide us? Because we're mostly looking at second quarter and then third quarter and fourth quarter. We're not looking ahead 100 or 200 years. And this is why I think your book, Meridith, is so important.
Well, I mean, that was my favorite part about the book, is the fact that what we were trying to do was most people wanted to take action in the middle of an uncertain marketplace. They just didn't know what to do. And we wanted to give them the path. We wanted to give them the strategies. But, there may be a few people listening to us that don't know this, but I seriously doubt it, that don't know you're an economist. So as much as you probably hate this question, give us a crystal ball. I mean, where do you see, they say we're moving into a bit of a boom right now. What do you think about? Do you agree with that? Do you see that lasting? What do you think the future holds, and what uncertainty is out there for us?
Thanks. And yes, I am a card-carrying, crystal ball-toting economist, and I love it because unlike most people, I get to wake up every single day and look at about 3 hours of economic data. And I know that for most people, that just makes them feel a little bit sick to their stomach, and I love it. So here's a few things that we need to be paying attention to. First, this year, 2021, has seen a huge infusion of government cash into the economy. That is what's driving the boom right now. It's artificial. It's not sustainable. It's not going to go on forever. We are being falsely propped up by all of these stimulus packages. This is going to come home to roost in terms of higher taxes for the next 4 to 8 years. And that's just a given. So business people right now need to be meeting with your accountant saying, we know capital gains taxes are going up. We know federal taxes are going up. We know that most states, I can't think of any off the top of my head, and I just looked at 40, are running in the red. And I'm not talking by just a few grand. I'm talking the average is about $9.5 grand, about between $9,000 and $10,000 per citizen per state in the red. So we're being artificially propped up. Our national debt, $29 trillion. It even stops being real money to me. So we've got some serious concerns. Business owners, you got to get out there. You got to be meeting with your accountants to understand increased federal taxes, increased state taxes, increased capital gains taxes, and increased estate taxes are coming as well across the board. All the taxes that you know of that states can impose as well, gas taxes, tobacco taxes, alcohol taxes, what we call the sin taxes, or anything fun, we're going to tax it. All of those taxes are going up, which means you've got to be better at making profit. Now, this is challenging because everybody else right now is trying to do the same thing. Number one. Number two, housing is on fire, not of course in a literal way, but in a metaphorical way. We are up by 24% from a year ago in terms of prices. For the first time ever, the average house sold in America, came out yesterday, is over $350,000. Keep in mind, not even 7 months ago, it was $312,000 as the median, the middle. That's where that was. So here's what's good and bad about the housing market. It's a great time to buy because interest rates are so low that a year ago, maybe you could afford to qualify for a $500,000 house. Now you can afford a $620,000 house. That's good because you're going to need it. But it's also a good time to sell because, again, capital gains taxes are set for 2021. They were set last October. But those capital gains taxes, and that's, of course, the tax you paid when you make money between the difference between the buying price and the selling price of your home, that's your capital gains. Capital gains taxes after 2021 are going to go up. So that's something to consider as well. Now, the third, of course, is the unemployment. And that's what's got everybody worried right now. We know that there's 9 million people who should be working and they're not working. As an economist, here's what's concerning to me. The labor force participation rate. That measures the number of people who are either actively seeking work or are working. That's the labor force. Generally, the demographic is between the ages of 16 and 65. The people excluded from that, full-time homemakers, full-time students, military, because they're not considered part of the labor force. Isn't that interesting? Not incarcerated, which could also be, construed as being part of the military, depending upon what ship you're on. So the labor force participation rate is a concern because the baby boomers, as you and I both know, because we've written extensively about this, the baby boomers are retiring at that rate of about 10,000 a day. And the millennials are underrepresented in the labor force. 52% of young people between the ages of 18 and 29, guess what? They've moved back home with mommy and daddy, or mommy or daddy, or some kind of parental figure. 52%, highest number ever since World War II. And in World War II, they moved back home to help the families. We were still mostly agrarian, so they were working the farm. That's not what's happening now. They have moved back home partly because they've lost jobs or they want to change jobs or school closed. Some people use the excuse that they didn't like where they were in college, except keep in mind the way we measure it, if you are at college, you are still considered living at home with mommy and daddy. So that number as an excuse comes in, but it actually doesn't mean anything in terms of actual numbers. So those three things I think are really important. And what worries me is the underrepresentation of millennials in the workplace. And then again, for the Gen Xers, all the Gen Xers say, but what about me? And I'm like, yeah, nobody talks about you. I'm sorry. I'm a Gen Xer too, and nobody cares. Nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Because you're small.
Yeah, these are things, but actually, even though Gen Xers are a smaller percentage of the population, they are overrepresented more than the millennials in the labor force. And then some people still have this idea that millennials are kids. They're not kids. No. The millennials started turning 40 this year. And they're not kids. They're responsible. They know what to do. They're team players. What we've got to get are the young millennials, the Gen Zers. We've got to get those 18 to 30-year-olds in the job market, excited about working, engaged in their career. And this is where leadership matters. we've got to be not only smart about our own businesses in terms of planning and thinking for the future, we've got to be looking around us in the housing market and things like that to figure out, hey, where do we base our business so that people have affordable places to live and so we're attractive? And then the third, of course, is making sure that we are attracting and retaining the right talent.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was when I did the research for the book, and I did the research for the report, we're talking about how uncertainty is impacting business today, and we studied leaders of all ages. Not as many boomers because they are leaving the workforce. A good representation from Gen X, but a lot of it was focused on millennials and older millennials. Those in their late 30s, up to 40. They were the ones who were most fearful of uncertainty and most fearful of leading in uncertainty. And I sort of have a theory about that, and I'm curious kind of where you fall on it. But I was talking with a gentleman earlier today who's my age, and I'm the last generation of the boomers, so I'm really up there. And we were talking about the fact, just having a conversation. I was interviewing him for his business about the fact that when we were kids, he knew I was from Asheville. He said, "Oh, I used to hitchhike up there from Mount Airy." And I started to laugh. I said, "Gosh, I used to hitchhike too when I was a kid." We think about it now, we would never let kids ever hitchhike. And we were talking about the fact of, due to just shifts in society, when I read the research and I read the report, no wonder older millennials are most fearful of leading in an uncertain environment. They haven't been exposed to it. In the workforce, we as boomers held on too tightly. We're still feeling the post-traumatic stress from 2008, and we didn't want anybody to screw the company up. Add to that, millennials have been raised in an environment, right or wrong, you can argue down both sides, where most of their life there has been an adult figure involved versus, like I said, this guy and I mean, as a young teenage girl, I hitchhiked. Who in their right mind would let their child do that now, right? But from that, you learned a lot. So I'm just curious, as you look at things and prepping, these future leaders for what is an environment that will remain uncertain, what are things we need to be doing? And do you believe there's validity to that, I guess?
I think you're absolutely right. And you are correct that the millennials, the 18 to 40-year-olds were the ones who really did suffer with the work from home environment, even though they are the ones who say overwhelmingly, 71%, say that they are reluctant to come back to a job that wants them to be in the office more than 2 or 3 days a week. Except they're the ones who also said we struggled more at home without that adult supervision. And I'm not saying that all millennials need more adult supervision, but I am saying that they have had a lot of it. They had and so sometimes when the baby boomers want to ding on the millennials, I'm like, who raised them?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Raise these people to know that there's always a hammock. There's no consequences for their actions. And all of a sudden, the virus crisis showed them, oh gosh, I have to make my own decisions and live with the consequences. We need more of that. We need more people being held accountable for the consequences of their actions. The problem is we've created a lot of people who now don't want to make decisions. And I see this all the time. I get brought in like you do with organizations where they say, I just need a coach because I need to make sure I'm making the right decision. And they're scared of making the wrong decision. So I love the fact that people like you and I get called, hey, what do we do about this? And what do you think? And well, let's talk through it. Let's talk through it, because part of this is they're looking for validation. They're looking for guidance. But what I think is interesting also is the 18 to 40-year-old crowd, they listen a lot more than the Gen Xers and the millennials think they do. When they come and ask you for advice, they're actually listening. And I remember my boss saying, well, let's talk about this, and I'm going to give you some wisdom. I just roll my eyes. I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding. Let me get back to work. They actually care. Because there's so much junk out there. There's so many distractions that when they find someone who does give them good advice and good wisdom, they latch onto those people and they do listen. So I think in the workplace, we've got to give younger generations of all levels. And you can be a younger worker and be 60 years old if you're in that position. And I got to tell you, a lot of people are doing that. They are going into the third act of their life and they're doing something completely different. And I love that. But when you've got the more inexperienced worker in that particular job, you have to sit down with them and say, all right, here are the expectations. This is what I expect from you. And this is where you may want to come talk to me, but I expect you to own it. Really, like the book you wrote, Own It.
Own it.
People have to own what they do. People have to be held accountable for their decisions because it will make them make better decisions.
Absolutely. You know, Mary, it's hard to believe, but we are coming to the end of this live stream. And speaking of listening to people, paying attention, what are some of your pieces of wisdom or your best piece of advice for a business that is looking at an uncertain environment, wondering what is going to happen in 2021? What are your words of wisdom for them?
Don't go it alone. You know, don't think you've got to have all the answers all the time. Don't think, oh gosh, you know, just because I'm the CEO or the president or the chairman of the board, I've got to have all the answers. That's why you have other people. Now, it's still your responsibility to make the big decisions and to make the right decisions, but that's why you're in that job. So talk to a coach, talk to consultants, talk to your board. Don't go it alone. Get as much information as possible, but understand that you can't not make a decision. And as you spoke about with Jon, that some people just froze in a crisis situation. They froze like deer in the headlights. And one of my favorite bosses ever, his name was General Tom Field, Army General. He used to tell us, he said, look, I'm never going to get perfect information. We're in a war. He said, you give me the information you have at the time and I will make the decision. And I was like, well, but what, you know, we're never going to have perfect information. He goes, you're right. We are never going to have perfect information. And that's where leaders come in.
Oh, that's fantastic advice. Mary, thank you so much for joining us today. And everybody, thank you for joining us today on Thrive, Turning Uncertainty to Competitive Advantage. Please think about buying the book. All you've got to do is go to Amazon, go to Thrive, Turning Uncertainty to Competitive Advantage. Join us every week right here, 1 o'clock, Mondays Eastern, where we have another guest, we solve another set of issues, and we turn all this uncertainty into your competitive advantage. We'll see you next week.